In the quiet hush of a morning, before the world begins to stir, when the air still carries the cool scent of dew, and the mind has not yet become entangled in the demands of the day, there lies a space where the truth of life is whispered gently, not shouted, not proclaimed, but softly breathed into being, a truth as old as time itself, that true wealth is not what you hold in your hands, but what you release from your heart. And the Zen path does not ask you to reject abundance, but to become so inwardly free that you are untouched by it, to be like the lotus that grows in the mud, yet remains unstained. And so we begin not with strategies or investments or plans, but with stillness, the stillness that gives rise to clarity, because in this stillness, when the chattering mind grows quiet and the ego's grasp weakens, we begin to see what truly matters and what merely distracts, what liberates and what entangles. And so the Zen approach to prosperity is not to chase, not to cling, not to accumulate out of fear or lack, but to allow abundance to flow through us, like wind through the trees or water in a stream, touching everything but clinging to nothing. And in this way, we become vessels for wealth, not containers. And we understand that money is energy, that it is neither good nor bad, but simply a current that amplifies intention. And when intention is rooted in compassion, clarity, and presence, then wealth becomes a force of harmony, not distortion. And so we sit, we breathe, we watch the rise and fall of desire in the mind without acting on it. And in this watching, we become aware of how grasping leads to suffering, how the more we crave, the more we suffer, and the more we let go, the more we open to peace. And so we do not renounce the world, but we stop worshiping it. We stop seeking our worth in the reflection of gold or the praise of others. And we begin to recognize that enough is not a number. It is a state of being. And from this state, prosperity can unfold, not as a goal to be reached, but as a natural expression of alignment. And so the Zen master walks through the world without seeking, and yet everything is given to him, because he does not cling, because he does not resist, because he moves with the Tao, the way of nature. And in that movement, there is grace. And in that grace, there is wealth, wealth of time, wealth of space, wealth of freedom, wealth of spirit. And this is the wealth that no thief can steal, and no market can crash. And in cultivating this, we return to the present, to the breath, to the moment, because this is where all true abundance begins, not in the distant future of achievement, but here, in the simplicity of now, in the taste of tea, the warmth of sun, the sound of wind. And when we train the mind to find contentment here, then even great riches cannot distract us. And when they come, we use them, we share them, we direct them with mindfulness, knowing they are not ours to keep but gifts to be passed along. And we no longer fear loss, because we no longer measure ourselves by what we own. And thus, paradoxically, we become open to receiving more, because the cup that is not clutched tightly is the one that can be refilled. So and so wealth comes, and it goes, and we remain steady, grounded, grateful, unattached. And from this ground grows a deeper abundance, not one of things, but of being, of knowing who we are, beyond our titles, beyond our possessions, beyond our story. And it is from here that we act in the world, not from lack, not from hunger, but from fullness. And this fullness becomes generosity, becomes wisdom, becomes impact, becomes presence. And those around us feel it, not because we speak it, but because we live it, quietly, steadily, like a tree rooted in silence, bearing fruit not for praise, but as its nature. And this is the Zen way of prosperity. Not flashy, not loud, not performative, but deep, authentic, and enduring. A prosperity that does not cost your peace, that does not demand your soul, but rather nourishes them. And when we walk this path, we discover that what we thought we wanted was only a shadow of what was truly possible, that the treasures of the world are pale imitations of the richness of inner stillness. And so we do not retreat from life, but we move through it, with eyes open and hands open, ready to receive and ready to release, because all things pass, and only awareness remains. And in this awareness, in this open-hearted engagement with the ever-changing dance of life, we discover a truth more valuable than any coin, more precious than any gem, that to be awake, to be free, to be fully here, is to be wealthy beyond measure. And so we breathe, and we walk, and we live with simplicity, with clarity, with intention, knowing that the path is not about escape, but about presence, not about rejection, but about transcendence. And in this transcendence, we hold nothing, and thus all is given. And so let the world move as it will. Let fortune rise and fall. Let gain come and go, and remain as the sky, vast, spacious, and untouched, while clouds of fortune pass through, never obscuring the still blue truth of your being. And when the world rushes, we return to the breath. When doubt arises, we return to the breath. When craving stirs, we return to the breath, and this return is our practice, our wealth, our why again and again, like waves returning to shore, like the bell that rings and reminds, you are here, you are enough, and everything else is extra. And as the breath deepens and the moment lengthens, we begin to understand that prosperity is not a peak to reach, but a rhythm to embody, not a destination lined with riches, but a walk made rich by awareness itself. And so we listen, not to the noise of comparison or the clamor of ambition, but to the still, quiet voice beneath it all, the voice that says, you are already whole. And from that wholeness, everything you touch becomes complete, not because you own it, but because you meet it with presence. And presence is the rarest wealth of all, in a world obsessed with accumulation. And so the Zen way teaches us to care for what we have, without needing more, to give without needing to be thanked, to move through the world not as a seeker, but as one who has already found. And in this way, every coin becomes sacred, every transaction an offering, every possession a reflection, not of status, but of stewardship. And thus the home we live in becomes a temple, the work we do becomes a prayer, and even the mundane becomes miraculous. For when the mind is still, the world reveals its depth, and we begin to see that what we called prosperity was often just distraction wrapped in glamour, that what we craved was not wealth but peace, not more but enough, not success but serenity. And with this seeing we awaken gently, like dawn rising through mist. And in this awakening, we no longer fear losing what we have, because we no longer confuse having with being. And in this freedom, we become the kind of person for whom wealth comes naturally, not because we chase it, but because we embody harmony, because we are aligned with the deeper currents of life, and life supports what is aligned, just as rivers support the stones that do not resist. And so we learn to rest, to trust, to release the tight grip of needing things to go our way, and we begin to flow, not passively, not without intention, but with a quiet faith that what is meant will come, and what comes will pass, and what passes was never ours to hold, only ours to witness, to honor, to appreciate. And in this sacred witnessing, even a single grain of rice becomes treasure, even a simple day becomes a gift. And from this place of inner abundance, we find that we need far less than we thought. And what we do have, we cherish more. And so the world slows, and the soul speaks, and we find joy not in the next purchase, but in the next breath, not in being admired, but in being present. And so the Zen way of wealth is not an escape from the world, but a deeper immersion into it, a way of being that transforms how we relate to money, to success, to ourselves. And in this transformation, we discover a kind of prosperity that is unshakable, not because it is vast, but because it is rooted, not because it dazzles, but because it endures. And so we walk slowly, intentionally, with a soft gaze and a clear heart, knowing that wherever we go, we bring the richness of awareness with us. And wherever we stay, we plant the seeds of peace. And whatever we give freely. And whatever we receive humbly. For nothing belongs to us, and yet everything is given. And this paradox becomes our path. To hold nothing and be full. To want nothing and be rich. To do nothing and yet transform the world through our presence alone. And so we bow to the moment, to the mystery, to the breath. And we live as the wind lives, moving without grasping, touching without clinging, passing through the world without leaving scars, only blessings. And as we continue walking the quiet path of the present moment, step by step, without rush, breath by breath, without judgment, we begin to sense how deeply the world changes when we ourselves stop needing it to change. How prosperity reveals itself not as something to acquire, but as something to notice, already here, already enough, resting gently beneath the layers of striving and resistance. And so we begin to live differently, not by force, but by awareness, not by retreating from the world, but by entering it fully, free from hunger, grounded in stillness, carrying not an agenda but a presence. And this presence is the most generous thing we can offer, because when we no longer need others to validate our worth, we meet them with openness instead of expectation. We see them without filters. We love them without condition. And in doing so, we shift from being consumers of life to stewards of it, caretakers of beauty, of peace, of balance. And this shift is the real wealth, not found in bank accounts or portfolios, but in the ability to sit in silence and feel whole, to look at the sky without needing more, to experience success without becoming owned by it. And in this freedom, we create, not for applause, but from inspiration, not to impress, but to express. And the fruits of this creation become offerings, not proofs of value. And when the world receives them, it does so not because we demanded attention, but because truth, when spoken without ego, resonates in the hearts of those who are ready. And this is the Zen way, to do the work and release the outcome, to walk the path and release the destination, to hold prosperity with such lightness that it no longer defines us. And then, paradoxically, it expands, because it is not constrained by fear. And so the more we give, the more we receive, not as a tactic, but as a rhythm of the universe mirrored in our being. And we begin to see wealth in every encounter, in every moment of kindness, in every act of mindfulness. And slowly, quietly, the lines between spiritual and material blur, because we no longer see them as opposites, but as reflections of the same truth, that anything approached with awareness becomes sacred, and anything clutched with desperation becomes a chain. And so we choose sacredness, we choose stillness, we choose to return again and again to this breath, this step, this moment. And in doing so, we find that the mind no longer spins with craving, that the body softens, that life flows, not always easily but always clearly. And clarity becomes our compass, not desire, and simplicity becomes our wealth, not excess, and grace becomes our power, not control. And in this new way of living, we are no longer lost in the waves of gain and loss, but we become the ocean itself, vast, deep, and unmoved by the tides. And this ocean, this stillness, This silent knowing is our home. And from here, we live with gentle strength, with open hands and clear hearts, asking for nothing, lacking nothing, and yet receiving all. For the world gives most to those who need least. And now we understand why the sage smiles, without reason, why the monk walks slowly through the market, why the wind moves freely through the trees, because they are all rich, not in gold or titles or likes, but in presence, in peace, in the quiet, luminous joy of enough. And now, so are we. And so as the rhythm of our days slows to the natural cadence of breath, of light shifting across the floor, of silence unfolding like a flower in the still air, we begin to trust that nothing more is needed, not to prove ourselves, not to secure some imagined future, not to impress or defend or accumulate. And in this trust, something remarkable begins to grow, not loudly, not urgently, but like a seed that has found the right soil at last. A wealth that is not dependent on outcome, not held hostage by change, not shattered by loss, for it lives in the one place, untouched by the fluctuations of the world, in awareness itself, in the clear open sky of mind that sees all, grasps nothing, and embraces everything as it is. And we begin to notice how this quiet, grounded way of being touches every part of life, how we speak more kindly, not because we try to, but because there is no agitation to defend, no need to assert, only presence meeting presence. How we work more mindfully, not to achieve more, but because attention itself becomes its own reward. How we give, not to earn virtue or build legacy, but because the joy of giving is its own form of abundance. And the more we give from this space, the more we receive, not in material terms, though that too may come, but in the richness of connection, in the depth of simplicity, in the freedom that arises when nothing must be clung to. And this is how the Zen way transforms not just our inner life, but our outer one as well. It doesn't ask us to give everything up, but to hold everything lightly. And this lightness becomes a kind of power, not the power that dominates, but the power that endures, the power that does not need to shout, because it is rooted in truth. And so we move through the world now, like the wind moves across the field, present, real, felt, but never captured. And in this way, we come to understand that true prosperity is spacious, generous, uncluttered, and endlessly renewable, because it comes from within, from the very act of being awake in this moment, and the next, and the next. And even when difficulty arises, we no longer resist it in the same way, because we see that pain too can be met with presence, and when it is, it passes more freely. And so suffering no longer defines us, and fear no longer imprisons us, and the heart becomes a quiet lake, reflecting the world without distortion. And in this lake, all things are seen clearly. Money, success, relationships, time. None of them needing to be enemies, all of them capable of being allies, when approached with wisdom, with awareness, with non-attachment. And now we see how strange it was to ever believe that wealth could be measured solely by numbers, that security could be built from walls, that peace could be earned through effort, when all along it was here, in this breath, in this pause, in this seeing. And so we return again and again, not to escape the world, but to meet it fully, freshly unburdened, and with each return, we shed a little more of the false, of the excess, of the noise, until what remains is the quiet clarity of truth, that you are not what you own, not what you achieve, not what you fear or crave, but the still, steady presence behind it all. And in living from that place, you become the wealth itself, not its seeker, not its prisoner, but its very source. And what flows from that source is enough, is more than enough. is infinite. If this message resonates, subscribe for daily Zen reflections and guided wisdom to help you reconnect, reflect, and become fully yourself. Until then, remember, when I had nothing, I had everything. Wealth is not found in possession, but in presence.